In our continuing series of ranking things, we're going to re-look at the win percentages and records we looked at a previous episode, um, but this time we're going to adjust them for ELO ratings. So, a few notes here. One is some of the players I went and checked the results, and I had listed some things not quite right. So, a bunch of people have a win or a loss added here and there, which can be quite a big swing, right? Um, if you think about the scores from last time, again, if you haven't watched those, this won't make any sense. But if you think about the scores from last time, changing a win or a loss here or there is in one sense a kind of small difference. It's usually not going to like move someone to a different tier, but it could make a difference within that tier. They could jump up a bunch of spots or fall down a few spots. Um, a few changed quite a bit. I realized, hey, I should cut this off on a different year. Usually I tried to stick with the year cutoffs I had before, but a few times I was like, why did I include 2013? They dropped off in 2013 and gave them better scores accordingly. But the main thing we're doing is we're going from win percentage to ELO. So it will still give the win percentage, but ELO takes the strength of your opposition and is sort of a win percentage adjusted accordingly. Average is 2,000, median is well under 2,000 uh, because of the tournament format, but also some other things. Most players are going to be below that average. Um, so that is to say, a kind of median player, your 50th percentile player, is maybe around 1950. It depends how long they played, because a lot of players who are clearly at the weakest end only played a few tournaments, lost all their games, and because ratings start at 2000, maybe they drop to 1950, but they don't play enough to drop further. So, in fact, you'll often see much better players around 1900 than the players you see around 1950. That's not too important for what we're doing here, though. We are looking at well above average players. But ELO will say, okay, you had a higher win percentage, but you did it against much tougher competition and going to adjust for that accordingly. It also changes over time. So, for instance, if you beat, let's just use me as an example, if you beat me in my first tournament, you are given credit for beating, a normal, like middling player, right? If you beat me after I've won a few tournaments, you were given credit for beating a much stronger player. And I think that's important, right? Because it can separate, oh, maybe you beat this big name and you beat them at their peak. That deserves a lot more credit than beating them like as they were just starting out or as they were fading off at, you know. So I think ELO does a really good adjustment. One downside to it is it does clearly inflate over time if players keep coming into the player pool. So I would say it is not inflating now at a time when the pool is pretty steady and does not have new points being added into it. But the more people come in who, you get a starting rating of 2000, most new players are much worse than that. They're going to be feeding rating points to other people. So as long as substantial numbers of people are still coming in, ratings are going to inflate. And you can, in your mind, figure out where you think that's going to go to. On the other hand, skill tends to go up too. And it might go up in alignment in a way that means the inflation kind of ends up not mattering, but it might not. Uh, so two things I did. One is I took the rating performance of each sample, but that's going to favor smaller samples, right? It's much easier to score well in 10 games than to score well in 30 games. It's easier to play well over 2 tournaments than to play well over 10 tournaments, right? So what I decided to do was take a 95% confidence interval around it, but it ended up that that's probably doesn't really apply well to ELO, um, and it ended up saying it ended up having too much faith in small samples, and it was very obvious. It would say, a player who performs this well over this sample, we are, 95 or depending how you do it, 97.5% confidence they are at least this good. And regularly, they would not, in fact, be that good in any surrounding sample. So it was not dropping off enough for low samples of play. And so I upped it to a z-score of 4 instead of 2, or 4 standard deviations. Um, I don't think standard deviations really apply to ELO, but it gave me a mathematical thing to use. And so what we're going to see with each player is we're going to see the ELO of their performance, and then a lower score that kind of indicates we are very confident they were at least this good for that period of time. And so if you only played like 10 games or 15 or 20 games, that might be 150 points below the actual performance you showed. Well, if you played like 70 games for the sample, it might only be like 70 points below. So some kind of adjustment for duration of performance, and we'll be giving both numbers for each player. As always, this is a peak measure. We're almost done with the intro. Peak measures credit you for good results close together rather than spread out. Some players, I really think this misses how good they were. One that comes to mind is Broccoli, um, where there's not really a way to show how strong she was, but she's better than the peak stuff makes her look. And I think it's fair to most players, but there will be some exceptions. I used years as cutoffs. So you happen to be amazing from like mid 2008 to mid 2009, take Scythe, that looks much worse than if you were just great throughout 2009, because to capture him, I have to go start of 2008 to end of 2009. Again, for most players, I think this is fair. I think this makes a neat cutoff. It means I can identify eras really cleanly. Sometimes I do it this way, sometimes I don't. I like doing it this way, but of course, it's going to benefit and hinder some players. Usually, players with long peaks, it's going to start making less of a difference because they're just putting up so many good results. But for short peaks, some short peaks will look really exceptional because it happens to fit well in a year or 2 year span, and others won't look as good because it happens not to, but it is just as good a peak. Also, and our last final caveat is this includes all tournaments at equal value. So if there are specific tournament types you think are worth more or less, be it open, closed, TTAC, Team Rhinoa, etc., then your opinions won't quite align with what I'm showing here, and that's fine. I don't think those tournaments are equal. I'm not going to pretend I do. I just wanted to put up a measure where we treated them as equal and see what came out. That said, let's get into it. And we're going to start with the solid run category, our bottom category, and see if anything's moved around. So our lowest rated run that was there was Cookie 2007 to 2015. He was under 50%, but he did it for such a long time at quite close to 50% that I still think it's pretty impressive and adds to his career, right? This is the category that it's not like, this doesn't make a player great, right? A player is not in the top 40 or 50 all time because they had one of these runs. But one of these runs definitely helps and has a very good chance to get you in the top 100 on its own. And so this is a run where he was close to 50% for a long time. Once you adjust for opposition, you actually see he was an above average player. 2050 is a cleanly above average player. And we are very confident he was, at the very worst, no worse than a slightly below average and above median or around median player. So this is still a pretty solid run. It's not what makes Cookie great, of course. Our next run that we have to compare is Turds 0607. He goes 8 and 7, so this is over 50%. You can see his performance is slightly higher, but it's such a small sample. A player who goes 26 and 29 is definitely a good player. Some weaker players are going to spike an 8 and 7, and you can see in the second number here, the performance 2070 is higher than the 2057, but we are very confident it's at least this level is significantly lower. And I think with this in mind, we're going to put it lower, even though it's a higher win percentage. Again, no one in this category, we're looking at the top 40 or so players of all time, is here because of these runs. We're just starting with them, and then we're going to move up to the better ones. Jadat 0709 goes 50%. That's a 2078 performance, which means his opposition was on average 2078, which is quite tough opposition. Both scores for ELO are a little higher than Turds, even though Turds has the higher win rate. And yeah, I think we'll put this slightly ahead of Turds. That Jadat's drop-off in 07 is a little better than Turds' start in 06. Okay, next up we have Deli's 2013. Deli's going to show up on these lists a whole bunch of times. This was a particularly weak period of Deli's career, which means he still went 8 and 6, and it's not as weak as I thought. Because you look at the win percentage, it's like, okay, that's slightly above 50%. But you adjust for opposition, and that's a 2171 performance. It's also very confident this is a higher minimum score. A player that can do this, given the opposition he had, it is more confident is good than even Cookie's 26 and 29. So once we adjust for opposition, and you see this a lot with the real greats like Deli, when he has down periods, or periods that look down, he is also facing really tough opposition. And yeah, we'll see this a few times, but I ranked this as the best of these, but it's clearly the best of these. And it's going to be better than some of the other ones we're about to see. Mafiosi also went to 8-6 and 08 to 11 as he was dropping off. And you can see it's a very good 8-6. It's not quite as good. It's clearly going to be ahead of Jadat. Is it ahead of Cookie? I think it's ahead of Cookie. Yeah. Potentially easier to do for a weaker player, but also the performance is clearly higher. We're going to put Mafiosi higher. Yeah, these rankings, not the most important part, but I think it's interesting. Okay, we have another relative down period of Delhi, the current one. Really hurt by a poor showing in Garland, which is, of course, high variance. But again, once you adjust for the opposition, this is clearly way above any run here. And in fact, given this 2200 score, it's possible this run should not be in this category, right? It's possible this run is just clearly a class above everything else here. In fact, for the moment, I think we should put it in a category above, because not only is it over 2200 performance, it's well over 2000 minimum ability. Like it's saying it's 99.9% sure he's at least this strong, right? He could be stronger than 2224, but this is just clearly a significantly higher number than these. And I think for now we're going to bump that to the next category, that we'll see if that holds up. Next, we have a Koner run. This is pretty solid. Does it beat Mafiosi? Little lower win percentage, but we did that last time. Little lower performance, little more confidence it's real. I think we're going to put it just behind Mafiosi. So you can see rankings are changing. I started at the bottom, right? Cookie was my lowest ranked run from win percentage stuff, and now Cookie has moved up. Some others have moved down, right? We're varying a little. I keep doing the one that would be the highest of any we had seen. I had ranked Koner as the highest, but we can see it moves down here as we adjust for a level of opposition. Next, we have Turds 2013 to 15, when he wasn't particularly active, but still playing pretty well. I'm going to put this one, I think, right behind Koner, I guess. Yeah, I think that feels right. I'm going to skip a bit past these so we can get to the more exciting runs a little quicker. We have Meta in 07-08. Nice scores there. That looks competitive with Delhi's run. I think I'm going to have it just behind Delhi's run. 1994 is higher than 1987, but it's close, and 2171 is pretty clearly higher than 2148. Little better performance for Delhi there. And yeah, as I said earlier, like Delhi in his like down periods, his runs look like they land in this category, but actually the down runs happened because he was facing tougher people. All right, we have Tezuka 08 to 16 after his really hot start and before his really great return. The kind of middle period. Very good player, 2100 performance. That's going to land. Well, it's got to be ahead of Koner. I think it's behind Mafiosi. Again, I think all these runs are just good. There's a pretty big gap at this point between runs like Delhi's here and Turds's. It's almost 100 ahead in both categories. Maybe it belongs in a different category. But I think for now we're going to keep them all together. But we see more separation as we go more in depth. Let's look at Sight, building up to his hot streak. Pretty similar to Meta. I think that's better than Mafiosi. Yeah, it's going to slot in here. Again, these are the two numbers I'm focusing on. This one is actual performance. This one is given how many games you played. What score are we like 100% sure you're better than? Like a player of this level is virtually never doing what you did. Okay, then we have Seto's start. That's looking a lot like Mafiosi. I think that slots in just one ahead of Mafiosi. Of course, Seto's later runs are transcendent, like absolutely incredible. Having runs here, if you're an all-time top player, my point of this category is that it adds to your case. This is good enough to be important to your resume, but not good enough to be the thing that makes the resume, right? So it's not like, oh, look, Seto had a 60% period or whatever. It's, oh, look, Seto was already good, and then he did these crazy things. All right, we get Vid in 0506. This looks definitely weaker than Turds 2013 to 15. It's definitely better than Jadat 0709. So the question is, do we want to put it ahead of Cookie? I don't. You might. I don't. I'm going to put it one behind Cookie. All right, next up we have MC, the start of MC. That's a pretty good start. That's going to be second place on this list. Actually, does it pass Delhi? It's 26 ahead in the second category, and I weight the second a little higher. Yeah, that's the best of these solid runs. So MC starts, a solid over 50% win record. But again, when you look at opposition, he's playing in that kind of peak 08 to 10 era. It really jumps up. Next, we have Metis playing in the same era, but not quite against the same opposition. You'll notice I had Metis ahead of MC, even though MC has a higher win percentage. That's because one of them I had missed a loss or something and had to adjust one of those adjustments. That said, 2057 and 1930 means we have a new bottom of the list. So big, nope, no it doesn't. Second bottom. Sorry, Turds. Yeah, Turds' start is not why he's a great. Still pretty solid though. Next, we have Kazik 0910. After his double finals, he faded a bit, but was still, as you can see here, a very capable player. He's ahead of or behind Seto. 20 and 20, he's just ahead of Seto. Good player, Kazik. You see him around playing close now occasionally, which is nice, under a Krasjul or some name like that. All right, then we get the start of Chickeny. Again, someone who you look at the win percentage, it's good, but once you adjust for opposition, starts looking a lot cleaner. I think this pretty clearly goes right behind Meta. And to end the group, we have Kaus Debonair's current run, not really enough games to say much. So you see performance that is kind of out of line with this group, but hard to be all that confident of. If he can keep it up for some number of games, this will definitely start belonging to a higher category. I think it's, even though he only needs 2 and 4 to catch up with Delhi's run is higher performance because it's against much harder opposition. I think we're going to put this at the top of solid run, and we'll see what Kaus can do with it in the future, because he's on a nice run in tournaments, and if he keeps it up, that would be really delightful given he's the winner of the first tournament. And that ends our solid run category. We have mostly kept solid runs the same, but we have moved a lot of the order around based on opposition. And Delhi's current level is just, while it, by win percentage looks in this category, once you notice, he's literally, basically only lost to myself and Seto, and he's beaten a bunch of really good players. It is much better than it looks, and much better than any other result here. So now we get to see how it compares to the other good runs. Cookie, with his current run, has a pretty hot run. Yeah, that's clearly ahead of Delhi here. Cookie winning a tournament is, of course, huge. We have Reyes, 2011-12. That's a hair ahead of Delhi, I think. Again, I'm valuing the second number more because I think I'm still slightly underrating longevity. And he's ahead about 30 on the second number, behind 30 on the first. I'm going to value the longevity just a touch more here. But you can see Delhi belongs in this category, right? Then we have Mafi Josie. This is the category, by the way, of this very comfortably would make you a top 100 player, and could be the case why you're top 40 or 50, but probably isn't. Okay, Mafi Josie. Yeah, see, 15 and 9 looks great, but the opposition was really soft. I think this is the first one where I'm going to drop it a category. This looks only marginally better than MC's start once we do this opposition adjustment. Again, ratings inflated over time, but '05 to '07 is starting to get a lot of that inflation. Yeah, I think we're just going to put this here. This is not Mafi Josie's best run, but it is to say this was probably a little weaker once we adjust for what was going on around it. Then we got Metis. Is this Metis' best run? I think this is Metis' best run, and these peak runs, Metis is one of those players that doesn't pop so much, but this looks pretty good now, right? This is, I think, clearly now best of the group in good run instead of, kind of among the group. And then topping the group is another person. Metis and Broccoli may be the people hurt most by this method. Just doesn't really pop here. I'm going to go middle of the group. Yeah, apologies to Broccoli. Way better than this makes her look. Firmly in my top 25 all time, but doesn't quite line up in a way that helps Peaks. This is just her whole career, by the way. That's a very good one. Okay, so that's the end of the good runs. Now we have the great runs. The kind of, here are 43 just really good runs. This is 18 of them is in the good run category, 18 of the remaining 43. These are the ones that kind of like single-handedly put you in top 40 all-time territory, and they're really good. Let's see how they hold up, and let's see if all of them hold up, right? Some of them are going to drop down. Some of them are going to be maybe more impressive. We start with Tezuka. I had that as the bottom of the group. And I think that pretty clearly, despite the really high win rate, Tezuka came on really strong. But I don't think the opposition was huge in those days. It should be in this category, but actually, pretty incredibly, I think Delial's current run, which I had in the solid run category, is going to pass Tezuka's early run, which I had in the great run category. And if you look at who they played, I bet you would agree. All right. Then we get Jaws. This isn't Tezuka's highest finish, so I'm not, Tezuka has a whole bunch of quality eras. The fact that he's already showed up multiple times and will show up again is to say Tezuka has played very well for a long time. Then we have Jaws 04 to 08, which is basically Jaws' whole run. It's very good. It's got to be worse than Cookie's current, I think. But it is so much longer. But looks a little worse than Broccoli. Yeah, and Broccoli's definitely better than Jaws. Touch better than Reye. Alright. Jaws lands here. One of the things about Jaws is if you look at the players he actually lost to, he is one of the most impressive lists of, who he's lost to. Just very few names that aren't really exceptional. I think his worst loss might be to Foyer, and Foyer's really good. Foyer I have, just a little outside, top 50, 60 all time, but also has a lot of huge wins against really good players. Just racked those up. I think he's one of the all-time leaders. He might be the all-time leader of non-tournament winners for wins against winners. He's really a competitive player. Then we have Sipes' God Run, which this really underrates because it's middle of '08 to middle of '09 and had to include some fluff at the ends. It also had a loss more than I thought it did. I had miscounted earlier. Definitely in this group, but also can't rise quite as high as I want it to. Pretty clearly between Broccoli and Jaws. Sipe was great. It's a real shame. Sipe is an incredible peak. He is one of the great 3 tournament peaks, but it doesn't land in this format. All right, then we have Koner 09-010. This is obviously not the last we will see of Koner. And yeah, I mean, this isn't... Metis' run set a bar that these runs are not beating. This is second. This is definitely second. But this shows how much better Metis' run was than I had formerly thought. I also like that we're going to start, given how many of these are dropping into the good run category, not clearly better than Metis, which I guess is kind of, we're looking for a jump above that. Maybe we'll move Metis up, actually. But I wanted to balance the groups more because we had kind of solid runs had a lot, great runs had a lot, good runs had very few. Now we're seeing that the good and the great runs kind of similar. Now we get Ray's best run. I actually miscounted it before. I counted it as 11 and 4. He actually went 12 and 4, which gives him a really huge performance rating over that run. This is his Garland run, and also a really good minimum score. This is the best in the group, and maybe the first to belong to the great run category. For now, I'm going to put it there. We're not going to see many 2300s for a long time. It is a short run, but even the 2150 is pretty good. If we think of this category as kind of the second number is in the vicinity of 2000, right? Most of these are somewhere around 2000. You do get down to like 1900 runs. Maybe there should be separation there, somewhere around. Yeah, these last couple seem a little worse, but we'll leave them there. But now we're starting to see, here we're starting to see lots of stuff, 2050 to 2150. And this is a little above that. So maybe it should be in the great run category, at least for now. Then we get Yojimbo's start. How did Yojimbo start? Well, 2/3 of his games were won, 22-26 performance, and he did it over a pretty good sample. Doesn't pass Metis, even though it has a higher win percentage. Looks a little worse than Koner. I think that's worse than Cookie as well, but definitely better than Broccoli. So this is to say, Yojimbo started very good. Very good. Like, what are the great starts we've seen? We've seen some stuff that's their whole career, like Jaws and Broccoli. So those are, of course, really impressive. But Tezuka's beginning was one of the better ones we'd seen so far. And now we got Yojimbo's start. All right. Next up, we have Tezuka's, I think, actual best run, his recent one, where not only did he put up an even higher win percentage than he put up before, but he did it, I think, against a much higher level of opponent. And so not only do we have around a 2150 score, but we have around a 2300 performance. Yeah, I think this goes right with Reye and deservedly in the great run category. And of players we've looked at, if this was all we knew about all players, Tezuka would definitely be the GOAT, right? With there's a third appearance somewhere. Why can't I find his name? There you go. He will be passed, but he currently has the lead. Then we get Kefka. Now, Kefka's one of the early greats that like no one ever talks about. The performance ratings might not be quite as good as the win percentage makes it look, but this is really good. This is really good. I guess it's just ahead of Scythe. He makes finals. He makes some other deep runs. He sticks around for a while playing like playing some weird rule sets, like no wall rules. I think is the one he plays a lot of. Someone else would know better than me. But yeah, Kefka was one of the greats of the early days, and I have at times thought he might be the greatest to never win a tournament. I currently think there are at least 2 players comfortably ahead of him. Why am I trying to not spoil things? You've seen these lists before. Chickeny and Piggy Man, I think, are the top 2. But Kefka is pretty high in that conversation. Okay. Next up, we have Sir Smoke's great run from 2010 to 2015. It could be divided up multiple ways. You can see it just lasted so long. If we cut it at exactly 2013, his 2013 peak is huge. Last time I ended up combining it with some others, and it ends up here. You could say this is worse than the Metis run, and you'd have a point. You definitely have a point. But I think if I was deciding it to maximize these scores, you could end up with Smokes higher. His 2013 is one of the really great single years someone ever had. And yeah. Let's bump Metis up. Bump Metis up. And we'll be honest to the numbers we have here. We'll drop Sir Smokes under Metis. Note they had a really interesting rivalry during these years, but also note if I was putting a bit more effort into optimizing this, I could move Smokes up. Okay. Next we have Grat. How's Grat gonna look? Now Grat's early. but not that early. Yeah, that's a big drop off. There are just so many rounds in early tournaments where you face someone who never played again or usually lost. Um, yeah, I'm gonna put this here. It's just not. It doesn't quite hold up if we're being honest, which doesn't mean there can't be great performances. Speaking of which, we have Jadat, who scores a bit better, not massively better though. That looks right on line with the Broccolis of the world and the Kepkas. Um, I do so. If you look at overall win percentage, Kepka comes out way higher than Jadat, but that's because he kept playing. That's because Jadat kept playing, and he kept playing at a solid rate, and that dropped his win percentages. If you actually compare them at their best, I probably lean Jadat. I think the Eris run is really incredible, and I think he's ahead. But the way I sometimes, and I think most people would have Jadat ahead. This isn't a hot take, but the way I sometimes do numbers, often do numbers, you will find Kefka coming out ahead. And I do think you look here, you say neither of them made much of an impact with the rest of their careers, though. Actually, Jadat, this is pretty solid. This is pretty good. So Jadat gets a little boost here, but I think even without it, he should be better. But you average these together, and he starts looking worse. So I think this is one of the difficulties of using averages rather than breaking each career up into portions, which is really what I'm trying to do here. And it's not quite fair to all players, but it's interesting. Now, here we have two things. We have Turds 0809 and Turds 16 to 23. Is Turds greater peak when he won Vincent, or the current one where he won Carver and Cosmos, two very short tournaments, but has had some really good performances with them? Was he best in 08? Was he best now? We can finally give a verdict. He went 19 and 8 in both periods, exactly the same win percentage. But we do have a verdict here. It's clearly current Turds is a little bit stronger performing. Just a little better. Not a massive amount. This is clearly slightly better than Metis. Is it better than Tezuka? No, it's not. And the other one, is it better than Tezuka? I think it is a touch better. Is it better than Reye? Probably not quite at Reye's peak. Reye comes out really well now. Really impressed by his Garland run. Again, if you don't like closed, you should adjust personally and be like, Reye sucks, we hate him. But he comes out with a really good peak here. Really impressive stuff. Beats some very good players. Alright, then we get Piggy Man. This is basically Piggy Man's whole run. He immediately is very good and only improves. Looks like a touch below Smokes, but just a hair, really in that category. And Piggy Man is someone where this peak thing doesn't quite get him because his career average is basically this peak, much like Broccoli and Metis. I actually think he's even stronger than this puts him, and this puts him in that great run category. Now, you might start saying, Koner's run looks pretty similar to this. We gotta have a cutoff somewhere, though, right? Maybe Koner makes that cutoff? We're gonna leave it out as for now. Debate in the comments. No one ever does, but you could. Alright, Chickeny. 2012 to 2014. Now, the thing about Chickeny's peak is the win percentage is good. I'd actually miscounted it earlier. I had added an extra year. No idea why he didn't do well in 2015. So his win percentage has gone up since I last talked about this. And also, he faced Yojimbo like a dozen times during this period. Not actually, but like 4. And so his strength of opposition was just absurd. He has games against like Nightwish, Yojimbo, Vid, Smokes, like really the greats of the 2013-ish era. He was just facing repeatedly, and everyone but Yojimbo he was beating. This is the best run of this category, and possibly deserves to be in a higher category, because we're going from a lot of results that are around 2150 as the second number to one that's basically 2200. Right? Should this be in the same category as Piggy Man's peak run? Maybe not, when the second number is almost as big as this number, right? So, actually, for now, yeah, we're gonna move Chickeny into the special run category for now. We may change it, but yeah, Chickeny was facing so much challenge here. Then we have Dream Virus, which is really early on, so is likely to get penalized here. And indeed, it's not as great as the win percentage might suggest. This looks very much like one in the good run rather than the great run category, but it's still very good. Guess it's a touch better than Kefka, and a touch worse than Jadat. That was easy. Yeah. So by win percentage, Dream Virus had come out as maybe this guy is one of the best to never win. And now he moves down a little to like, he's with Kefka and Jadat. I think Jadat's the best of those three. I could easily be wrong. I know he's like widely accepted as the best, but I think that's correct. But I think also the Piggy Mans, the Meatuses, and the Chickenies are on a different level. Also note like who had really good runs before they won. I guess Jaws is also a top non-winner. Reye is a top non-winner. Grat is a top non-winner. And Tezuka 0607 would wait another 15 years before he won something. Hard to get a win. Now, by the time this comes out, Reye may have won Balance of Power, or Yevon may have won Balance of Power. I don't keep super technical stats on the TTN stuff. At some point, I'd like to include them more, but it's not something I'm doing immediately, so it wouldn't count as winning a championship for this kind of list. But obviously, it is a major. Okay, then we have Mafi Josie's 0304 run. Yeah, this is very good. I think. Where's this going to land? But this is another one. It's early. The opposition's not that great. Probably just ahead of Yojimbo's start. Very good start for Mafi Josie. You'll notice he has appeared on this list 3 times, which is pretty good. And our very last one of the category, Peak D. I actually divided up his list incorrectly, so it's a little better win percentage than it looks. But also, despite beating Yojimbo a whole bunch of times, it was usually Yojimbo before Yojimbo started crushing. Only once is like peak Yojimbo. And overall, it faces the kind of same penalties that these other early tournaments often face. I think it's gonna go here. And that actually feels right to me. D is a winner, but I think like Mafi Josie could just as easily be a winner kind of thing. Yeah, I think this is about right. Yeah. So that's our current list. We'll look at it next time. We'll add more names. We'll look at the special runs, the top runs, elite runs, GOAT runs, and start including them. But I think, yeah, you can see that Chickenies, you start looking at the tournament trees, and you compare Chickenies 2813 with something like, I don't know, I mean, it is a really high win percentage anyway, but something like Dream Virus's very similar win percentage from 2004 to 2008. If you look at who they played, you'll be like, yeah, Chickenies a class ahead here. Which is not to say that Dream Virus isn't great. Again, everyone on these lists is great. This is very much top people, and we are finding differences, and I think ELO is a helpful way to do so. Again, I made no adjustments for tournament types, right? If you were on a team in Rhinoa, you may have been the one that got the wins. It may have been your teammate. I credit it the same. You may have lost, or it may have been your teammate. I credit it the same. Closed tournaments, I'm crediting the same. TTAC, which I think some people would value more, site championship. Others would value less. Includes closed, includes random. Others would value more, is best of 3 rather than best of 1. Like, we can definitely split that different ways. But I just included everything as the same and saw how it came out. And what it comes out is, you can see why Chickeny is the best player to never win a tournament. Which doesn't mean Meatus or Piggy couldn't get there. And it doesn't mean my rankings would actually be exactly the same as this. Like, I think Piggy's better than Mutus, for instance, and he shows up a little lower here. I think Piggy Man's clearly the number 2 to never win, actually, but not every list will have that. All right.